Dobro.
I'm okay.
Okay, I was knocked then. Oh man. I'll do that again, just for the noise of the lift bag inflating. It's like something off Star Trek.
What's up guys, welcome to Freedive Passion. Today I'm going to discuss the 3 types of training which helped me the most in my recent no limits dive to 120 meters. The most important things when it comes to no limit diving are equalization, flexibility, and mental strength. Now I've developed my mental strength over years and years of training, so that was already in place. But since I was going to depths that I've never been to before, my focus was on equalization and flexibility. To help master my equalization, I found dry training to be incredibly helpful. And if you think about it, if you do dry training, you can spend 20 minutes of your day just focusing on equalization. If you want to do that while you're diving, you need to get in your wetsuit, get out to the dive site, breathe up, and then do your dive. And out of all this time, it's only while you're actually diving that you get to practice equalization. So in an hour and a half or 2 hour session, you might get 10 minutes of equalization practice. Whereas doing this stuff dry, it gives you, if you have 20 minutes or 10 minutes, then that whole time will be spent equalizing. I would use the auto vent a lot. The auto vent is very useful because it gives you feedback about whether you're doing all your maneuvers correctly. It also gives you extra resistance than what you would feel when you're actually equalizing. I'm a big fan of making any training that I do harder than what a real dive is going to feel. So for instance, when I fill up the auto vent balloon and just hold the balloon with my mouth fill and my glottis, there's more pressure on my glottis than what there is when I take a normal mouth fill. So when I do take a normal mouth fill, it's going to feel very easy. In general, with the auto vent, I would charge behind the various locks, practice switching through the different locks with this extra pressure from the balloon, and this helped me a lot. I would do generally about 10 minutes of auto vent a day. Normally I just left it by my bed. Before I went to sleep, I would pick it up and do some training. I found for me a specific weakness in my mouth fill was holding a very full mouth fill. I found it quite uncomfortable to have such a large amount of air in my mouth and such pressure against my glottis. It would trigger me to swallow. So to get over this, I simply would spend a lot of time a day with a huge mouthful to kind of just get used to the feeling. And truly it didn't even take very long. Just taking that big mouthful and holding it just got me used to the feeling, so it was less of a big deal in the water. I would also practice recharging my mouthful, which is something I do as I descend down to depth. I'll take my mouthful almost right away within 5 meters, and then I will keep topping it up until I can't top it up anymore. So I would also practice this dry. To improve my flexibility, I started to incorporate empty lung stretching into my daily life. I would do between 15 and 20 minutes every single day. In the past, I've never really focused on this, but I got convinced of its benefits by a friend. So I thought, okay, I'll give it a try. As a freediver, I should experiment with these things. If it works, I can use it for my training or also to help my athletes in the future. And it totally makes sense if you think about it. If we want our bodies to become more flexible, we need to create enough stress regularly enough to force that adaptation into our body. It's not just going to become flexible on its own. If I only put my lungs and trachea under stress while I'm diving, maybe I'll get to do 1 or 2 dives a week, so it's simply not enough. Having this lung stretching every single day put enough stress on my respiratory muscles and my trachea and my lungs to start to make them more and more flexible progressively over a long period of time. The third type of training which I used was Frc diving. Now, my lifestyle might seem like I get to spend a lot of time training for myself, but in reality I'm a coach and a safety diver, and the majority of my time in the water is spent focusing on other people. If I want to dive for myself, then I like to dive with no warm-up. first thing in the morning, and that's just not possible that often. Also, if I'm going to be diving for the whole rest of the day, I don't want to do a particularly deep dive in the morning because of DCS and the risk of overtraining. So a lot of the time I don't get to do my training deep. FRC has allowed me to be able to fit in some time to train the adaptation within my body, to train my relaxation on a regular basis. I could always find a spare couple of minutes just to do a quick FRC dive. FRCs are very useful because they allowed me to practice my mouth fill while in my residual volume and not have to do a deep dive, therefore saving on fatigue and saving on the amount of nitrogen I build up during my dive session. They're also useful because they put a lot of stress on your lungs and your trachea, so it's building flexibility. In fact, my deepest FRC dive to 26 meters with a mouthful from the surface left me feeling more uncomfortable, more pressure in my chest than what I felt at 120 meters. So again, like I already mentioned, if I can train in a way which feels more difficult than the actual dive, then for sure I'm going to incorporate that type of training rather than an easier type of training. Training FRC diving can be very stressful for your lungs, so I was sure to increase my depth over a long period of time. I gave myself 3 months of doing FRCs to slowly build up my depth and my comfort with the negative pressure within my lungs. At first I could only do about 12 meters before I felt the tightness in my chest, which tells me my trachea is being stretched. So this was great. I knew at 12 meters my body was going to have to start to adapt. Once I'd figured out how deep I could go before I felt pressure in my chest and I was sure that I was getting some positive adaptations from the dive, the best thing I did for my equalization was to only take enough air to get down to that depth. So when I was on the surface, I would take enough air into my mouth, normally it was just behind my tongue, to get me down to the point where my mouth fill ran out at the exact same moment where I should turn for my chest. So this meant on every dive I would get to practice the toughest part of mouth fill, which is the last bit, working with the smallest amount of air. Over the course of 3 months, I could do an FRC from 12 in the beginning to 25 in the end. Once I could take a mouth fill on the surface and take it down to 25, I was very confident that both my lungs and my equalization could handle a no limits dive to 120 meters. Once I had these skills in place, I wanted to keep my deep diving to a minimum. Like I mentioned, I don't have much time for deep diving. Even if I do a deep dive, I'll have to do coaching and safety diving as well, so decompression sickness is a real worry of mine, and so is overtraining because I don't get many rest days. So what I did is I did an 80 meter, a 90 meter and a 100 meter variable spread out over a couple of weeks, and then did 110 meters no limits, and my next dive was my national record attempt of 120 meters. So as you can see, the vast majority of my training was between 12 and 25 meters, or it was done in the dry. One thing I should add is that training in this way was only possible because of the psychological training that I've already done and already had in place before I even started training for this dive. So for me, the idea of 120 meters doesn't mean anything. The only thing that's important to me is, can I equalize that deep? Am I flexible enough to go that deep? And will I be able to handle the narcosis? And the answer to them 3 was yes. I already knew I could before I'd done the dive. Therefore, 120 meters, the actual depth, didn't mean anything to me. Now for somebody else who wanted to do 120 meters but doesn't have that mental concentration, that focus, that strength of mind in place, I would recommend a completely different way to train. They would have to do more dives to depth, more repetitions at depth, just to build up the confidence that they can do 120 meters, even if they already had all the tools in place before we started to train. Alright guys, that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed the video and got something out of it. I just want to mention that if anybody wants coaching from me, wants to take part in my workshop, or would like to do our month-long mentorship where I take you under my wing, we'll train together, we'll do stretching together, yoga together, meditation, go to the gym, support each other in each other's training, and basically I just want to give you the knowledge that you need to start to progress over the rest of your life. For more information on any of these things, you can check out the website or just email me directly. Okay, so until next time guys, take it easy and dive safe.